Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Tuesday, November 25th, 2025. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and Change. This podcast covers the national champions. It's good to be king. I thought there was a chance I'd have to retire that opening after a month, after 2 months. Still going strong. Also going strong, Garrick Hodge, Mark Porter. Gentlemen, it is the game. We are back to where we started, sort of. Normally, we focus almost exclusively on recruiting on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but we'll make an exception today. Mark Porter, your thoughts on the game as we are, 360 some odd days past the last one?
Yeah, there's a lot of obvious storylines that the Bucknutters are probably deep into by now. So I try not to overstate the obvious of the importance, the emotion. I mean, it's the biggest game in college sports. How do I possibly be so profound to summarize it so, succinctly? So I think, though, that Ohio State is going to open up a can of, it's a lot of fury that I think is going to be unleashed. I think that it being at Michigan, you would think is a disadvantage, but I think it's almost like Ohio State would like to embarrass them in front of their fans and, let their fans go through the pain right up close that they've been put through. I know you want to win at your home field, but I almost think there's just they want to go up there and prove it up there because that would be the harder place to prove that you could win. I don't think there'll be any nonsense where we're going to try to prove to run the ball and do it a certain way. I think they're just going to go after them. And I think that the mindset of the players, much like their playoff run last year, is just, furious. I think they're just so furious of listening. I am, the 4 years of having this little asterisk by everything, that the only way that goes away is by a win. Talk about the team. Yeah, Julian Sain's playing on a high level. Are the receivers going to be back? Probably. I think the O-line has been playing better, but again, we'll see what they do against Michigan. Michigan maybe has some weird little thing with trying to run the ball against them, but this offensive line has a lot to prove this week. And I don't think there's any real excuses if you come in there in full strength. I mean, this is kind of like as big of a must-win game. And I listen to other people prognosticate, this is lopsided, it's going to be a blowout. I don't think anybody takes it like that at Ohio State. I think they take it like they're an even foe where you don't give them that little edge. So, it's hard to give a profound response to that question where this game is talked about in nauseum.
Garrick, we had to let go of Bill because he was 0-4 against Michigan. Just kidding. Your thoughts on the game?
I probably shouldn't reveal that since I've been covering Ohio State, I have seen the Buckeyes go 0-4 against Michigan too. So I feel like you hired me under false pretenses. But nonetheless,
I didn't know that.
I look forward to this being my last Morning 5 show, barring a Ohio State win on Saturday. So no pressure, right? But I think it's a fascinating game from all angles. I share Mark's optimism, but I don't know if I'm quite ready to say that I think they're going to open up a can. I think that the injuries on both sides are pretty interesting when you look at it. You heard it straight from the horse's mouth on the Caleb Downs podcast yesterday that Jeremiah Smith said that he's pretty confident he's going to play. We'll see if Carnell Tate also shares that sentiment. I know a lot of fans are really hoping that he will, and I know Carnell Tate wants to. So if he's capable of doing it, even if he's less than 100%, I know he certainly will be out there. But we won't know until kickoff whether he's going to be healthy enough to do that, right? And no matter what Ryan Day says today at the Tuesday presser, take it with a grain of salt, right? But I know everyone's making a lot about Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, but Michigan's got some pretty key injuries too, guys. Max Bredson, their fullback, is a really key focal point for them in the running game, according to Pro Football Focus. And I know some people love those analytics, some people don't. But nonetheless, he's the second highest graded running fullback in the country. So if they don't have him, and Sharon Moore said that his x-rays don't look great yesterday, but he also kind of alluded to that Max might try to tough guy it out, right? But if he's not the lead blocker and who knows who's going to be the running back? Jordan Marshall missed last game against Maryland. Justice Haynes obviously will miss this game. I assume Jordan Marshall will probably play. A great running back out of Ohio that Ohio State was really into recruiting for a while and ultimately ended up going with Michigan. But Jordan Marshall, and honestly, who knows what's going on with their leading tackler, Ernest Osman. He has 60 plus tackles, and then he just all of a sudden doesn't go to Maryland and misses that game. And they say he's day to day, and there's just this weird speculation on Michigan message boards about what's going on with him and whether it's a physical injury or whether it's something else. But it's an interesting week for that to all unfold. So as much ado about, I don't want to say about nothing because it's certainly not nothing, but as much ado about Ohio State's injuries with Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, there's also a lot of key injuries on the Michigan side too. So you got to take that into equation. I was very confident that Ohio State would finally get off the skid last year. We don't need to regurgitate what happened because everyone knows what happened, that they got in their own head. And like Mark said, they tried to run the ball straight into the arms of a top five NFL draft pick, and that went about as well as you thought it would have. But I expect Ohio State to play free and loose. And as much pressure as there is on Ryan Day, there really isn't much pressure on Ryan Day if you think about it, because yes, is he going to get a lot of fan vitriol if he loses unfathomably for a fifth straight time? Of course he will. Will it impact his job whatsoever? No, it's not going to. Can they still win the national championship if they lose this game? Of course they can. They've proven that they can do it when they lost to a much worse Michigan team last year. Now, before I said any of the Bucknutters off, that doesn't excuse a Michigan loss. I'm not downplaying the significance of the game. It's the greatest rivalry in the history of college football. But I'm saying all that external pressure that Ryan Day was facing last year really isn't there anymore. And I would think that he's learned the lessons of, okay, you don't have to try to outrush them or prove how tough you are against them. Just win the game, get the monkey off your back. And honestly, I'm kind of workshopping a story that I hope I get to write on Saturday. This is really Ryan's last test. I mean, he's won 15 straight games since that game. He's had the greatest run in college football history after that game with a 4-game playoff. And now he's the number one team in the country, and there doesn't appear to be a close second just based on the rest of the country. If he can go in and beat the only thing that's eluded him in his Ohio State career, I mean, the sky's the limit for him and his potential and his legacy in Columbus. So I'm really excited to see how this plays out.
I said this.
Yeah, one more thought. I think just quickly, Matt Patricia over Bryce Underwood.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I think that matchup alone. What I've watched of Michigan, I'm not as impressed by Bryce Underwood this year. Maybe his future, he grows by leaps and bounds in the future. But, boy, from what I've seen out of Patricia against these other quarterbacks, and we've broken down a lot of film, I'm almost getting tired of trying to figure out Patricia's defense, and I have the rewind button and 10 minutes to stare at it, where I'm like, why is there a guy standing right there right now? So I think Bryce Underwood, if he's going to try to throw the ball, and then if you want to rely on him scrambling, good luck. So I think that's a serious advantage, Ohio State.
So I talked about this with Dave a lot yesterday and said, I don't care what teams you root for. I don't know if anyone roots for anyone as hard as they root for the Buckeyes, but even take your teams where your kids are on the teams or whatever else. As you look back on the past year and look over any individual sporting event, at least for me, and you guys can speak at it, after I get a little further away from a sporting event, I can see it a little more rationally and say, okay, we lost because of this, or this went wrong here, and I can understand that. I cannot explain to you what happened in that game last year. I've never been able to come to terms with it because it doesn't make any sense to me, especially in light of the fact that since then, they've been the best run college football program I've seen in terms of everything that goes into it, down to the portal and the recruiting and the coaching and the hiring. And I'll go back to what Mark said. If I'm looking for a reason to be confident, it is that Matt Patricia was not here last year. He carries none of those bags. he gets to kind of come at it fresh. And they've been so buttoned up on defense, not just good, and I keep saying this, but buttoned up, and that they don't seem to bust. I knock on wood for that. If you're going to beat them, you have to actually beat them, which is a wonderful thing to do when you have the best players. If you can take scheme, I know we're great at scheme, but if you can take scheme out of it and it's just a track meet, I'm very confident in the Buckeyes. All right. We will get to your questions on the game down the stretch here. Like I said, or like the banner says, if you have questions for Garrick and Mark, have at it. Where are we on the recruiting front, Garrick? This was a decent weekend for visitors. Maybe it wasn't the Rutgers game, maybe it wasn't the star-studded affair in mass, but there were a few very interesting and important visitors. Can you review for us the impact of this past weekend and how you see it playing out going forward?
Yeah, I think in terms of where we at in recruiting, I think this week is going to be relatively quiet. I mean, you never know with these things, of course. What was true an hour ago may not be true an hour from now, as we always say. But I'm not expecting any rapid movement. There was no 2026 official visitors on campus. Next week will be a different story, of course, because we'll have National Signing Day on a week from Wednesday. But this week, at least from the Rutgers weekend, I should say, I don't expect any crazy movement. But Dan, like you said, there were a couple interesting visitors. Mekhi Brown, a 6'7", and I will say that again so you hear that correctly. 6'7", 230-pound edge rusher from Greenwich, Connecticut.
Greenwich.
All right. Well, thank
you.
You
will get called on that one.
Yes, but a East Coast standout. Is in the top 75 prospects in the 2027 recruiting class from the top 247. Really enjoyed catching up with him. It was his first visit to Ohio State. He's basically gotten every blue blood offer under the sun in the past couple months or so. He's a guy that's really seen his recruiting stock take off over the past couple months. The Buckeyes offered in late September, and ever since then, I asked him how it kind of felt to get that Ohio State offer, and he's like, I was getting some interest from some pretty nice programs like USC and schools of those nature. But once Ohio State offered me the defending national champions, I knew that, my life's about to change. He got up there. He said he loved it. Even though he's not a linebacker per se, he's more of a versatile edge rusher. He said he loved watching Arvell Reese and the impact that he has on the game. He watched even though it was just the Rutgers game, he said he loved the atmosphere. He said he couldn't hear himself think on one particular fourth down play. And honestly, he really enjoyed his visit. He's still kind of early in his recruitment. He's not ready to make a decision. I don't think he will until we get to the summer. But he said that Ohio State has definitely earned another visit, whether it be in the spring or the summer. And I think that Ohio State's going to be right to the end with him. And then the other key visitor that everyone wants to know about is DJ Jacobs, who is a 6'5". I know he's not 2 inches shorter than Mekhi. Everyone always freaks out about 6'7" as an edge rusher. Wow. But he is 6'5", 225 pounds, another edge out of Georgia. And Dan, this is the number one overall prospect per 247 Sports' rankings in the 2027 class. It was his first ever visit to Ohio State. He arrived pretty late, and I think that's just more of a factor if he lives out of state so far, and it was a noon kickoff, so you make the best with what you have sometimes. Again, noon kickoffs, they are what they are. But from all indications, he enjoyed his visit. Again, nothing imminent here. I think this was more of a getting to know you. He spent a lot of time with Larry Johnson, Ryan Day, all those guys, really got his first kind of feel for how Ohio State does things in his recruitment. His dad is a Georgia legacy, so it's going to be a tough pull. But I think Ohio State really did well here and at least gave him something to think about going forward. The rest, it's a couple interesting 2027s that probably merit more discussion in the spring and the summertime than they do as more of a headliners. But it was kind of an interesting recruiting weekend overall when you just think of it more of in that relaxed atmosphere with those two headliners that we discussed.
I do like those two guys getting extreme attention. If anybody wants to go check them out, I don't think it's any coincidence that people are going to talk about Arvell Reese, considering his draft stock skyrocketing this year to the point where everyone would like to be talked about as a top 3 pick in the draft. So we are in good shape there. All right, we're going to take a look at the Rutgers game here. Buckeye in the Sky, of course, runs every Monday from Mark, and it's a breakdown of the film. Now, we focused on some of the other dudes here. Obviously, this game was not the most competitive, but I think you can learn a lot from these, especially if you get to see some youngsters. Mark, take it away.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, sometimes these games, it's hard to get excited about any one play. And, you hear me say duplicatable. Is what you're doing against Rutgers duplicatable against Indiana or a national championship run or whatever? Maybe not, but let's watch it. I hate to bring this up before this play, but the Mark Sanchez butt fumble came to mind when I watched this. Power gap play, kick out, lead through. I mean, this is the Jim Tressel homage, the old power play. Everybody runs this straight downhill. The block's there. Bo's just going to hit this, I think, and there's a butt right in the hole. And
Friendly fire.
Yeah, I think sometimes as a running back, you're like, oh, I'll just push the pile. Just run right up their back, and, he'll give. And I think this is a case of there being no give, and it catches you right on the ball. Yeah, and you fumble. Okay, that's, the oddities of football. This player here I'm going to talk about for a couple seconds because I'm going to maybe get on a soapbox about a philosophy. All 5 guys have their hands in the dirt. No stand-up defensive ends. That means these guys are track stances coming off the ball, trying to penetrate, push people back on 4th and 1. There's no illusion there. You know how we've been standing up our defensive ends in a 2-point a lot? That illusion's gone. You got 4 linebackers right up in their face, and I'm going to highlight these corners. They're pressed man-to-man, and there's no safety, and that's what I'm going to kind of talk about here for a second. When I was coaching, and not that I'm some, great coach, but I had an NFL assistant who's a big-time player, and he played for Buddy Ryan. And then in this exact defense, we were talking about it one day where I'm like, hey, I want to put a safety back in case something, they crack us or hit us with the seam. We have someone there, and it doesn't cost us a touchdown. And he said something to me. He said, force the issue. Put that safety down here, and that safety is going to either make a tackle 2 yards deep or he's not. And he may make a tackle back here 10 yards deep or he's not. He goes, but force the issue. Go play football and attack. And I think that philosophy, and the reason I bring it up, is the Matt Patricia philosophy. There is no like, hey, let's be cautious and worry about a breakaway. It's like you're in 4th and 2. We're going to put a defense out there that's going to stop you. You want to beat our press man-to-man, beat this. So he is an aggressive play caller. I mean, he really is not afraid. We don't see cover 0 much. I can count you how many times I've said, hey, we're in cover 0. And on the 30-yard line the other way, where if they crack this and there's a seam there, it's a sprint to the end zone and there's nobody there. So then there's the guy right there to force the issue. Your safety's down in the box instead of standing 10 yards deep with a guy running, full head of steam at him. So great patience by that safety. Okay, unbalanced. The guy highlighted is not eligible. And who do they have covering him? A DB. So they were fooled by this formation. On the weak side, there's only 3 guys to block, right? Ohio State's you're only going to be able to do this once all year because once this is on film, you don't get to do it again. You motion over, you pull the guard, and you bring the backside H back, and all of a sudden you got 5 blockers on 3. Next team that sees this will be ready for this type of scheme, but this hits clean as day. And you get rewarded for a trick scheme where, boom, everybody's blocked. And then just like I said, force the issue. There's your safety in space. Boy, wouldn't you rather have him sitting in that hole and making the play in the hole? So
It's hard to go untouched from the 11.
I mean, so that's just a little thought of the day that when I was watching that, I'm there. Here it is again, a force the issue type scenario, back-to-back plays. Okay. So we're Ohio State on defense. You see the 3-man rush in purple, cover 2 shell. Ohio State's been playing a lot of cover 2 with Caleb Downs there in the middle, kind of roaming. And he can come down and play middle linebacker or he can stay deep. Only 3 guys into this route. You have 8 guys in coverage versus 3. So I think, Rutgers is at a disadvantage here. When you only rush 3, you run the risk of your defensive end getting pinned inside. And that just means you can break contain. And, boy, he gets pinned inside big time there. But, there's so many guys in coverage. They're lucky to find a 6-8 yard gain, whatever that is, on the sidelines because they only had 3 guys out in the route. Stuff like that. Again, is that duplicatable? Do you want to make a living throwing, underneath all day? Here's a play that I know they highlighted on TV, but we'll talk about it. This is it's going to be a run to the right, but you're asking your receiver to cut off a defensive end. And to do that, he would probably have to step in here. This defensive end happens to be on a slant. And I know the guys on TV criticized the receiver, for not being able to get down in there and make that block. That's a defensive end slanting inside. I doubt Ohio State called that play thinking they were going to slant to the opposite side and give that receiver such a tough block. Looks like Dan's going to let us do one more here.
This is the last one.
Yeah, 5-man rush. The guy in yellow was the blitzer. Man-to-man with your quarterback spy here. Now, with the motion here, it definitely gives away that you're in man-to-man. And Ohio State's going to beat this with what's called a sneak route, and it may be called other things, and I'll kind of highlight. This tight end right here is blocking. That's why you can't see him. Well, when you have the guy who's covering him standing there watching him block, and anytime your guy blocks, you go look for work or you do something else, okay? But you just don't stand there and watch him for very long. The tight end will sneak out there, and in man-to-man, there's no one on him now because the guy the spy picks him up late, but it's too late. And then you have a guy just running in a free field. Great scheme against man-to-man. These are the type of things that, I think you're going to see that same play, that same route by Max Clare 2 more times in this film if you keep watching, where they ran different concepts with that route. It looked like, oh my God, they keep running the same play. Totally different plays, totally different concepts, play action, sneaks, and drags. But Max Clare kept catching a drag running to his right. A lot of for Michigan to look at in addition to the receivers when you prepare for Max Clare. Now they showed how they could feature him, so now you got to deal with that.
A couple things. One underrated aspect of Julian Sayan's game, if you watch that, he is pressured. He lets the ball go early. Yes. He throws handoffs. The reason Claire is able to catch that and run for so long is it's a subtle thing, but guys who can throw the ball where you catch it in stride, that's very underrated. And this is a little obscure, and then we'll get to your questions. I think you're going to see in football in general the 5-man front on defense become out cuisine going forward, because what you do is you force all 5 linemen to block one-on-one, and they've gotten so good now at, team blocking and catching an edge and moving on. If you really think you have the 5 best rushers and if you put a 5-man front up there and, like Mark showed, have the guys in the back to make up for kind of that lack of either a linebacker or defensive back, you have an advantage, especially in short yardage. Shocker, there's another team I pull for that has gone to the 5-man front because certain Super Bowl champions can't block it, and it works. That's a fact. I'm serious. That's going to be a new thing. I promise you guys this.
The Cowboys, and I know Dan's going to love this digression, but bringing Pickett and the other defensive tackle in and getting rid of their
Pickens,
linebacker.
dude. Joe Pickett played quarterback for Ignatius in 1989.
Okay, but that was a Jerry Jones genius move because you cannot run the ball on the Cowboys right now.
They're playing 3 defensive tackles, so if your third defensive tackle is talented enough, like at a place like Ohio State, you can get by with that. Now you've got girth and everything like that. And look, when you have number 2 in the back, alongside number 0 and number 8, by the way, it gives you that's not a realistic approach to football. It's just it's gluttony. All right, we're going to take some questions here. The first was a tribute to a young man named, I don't want to say his last name because I'm sure he gets this, Braden DeVito of the Shelby Whippets, on a historic career in North Central Ohio. Almost 13,000 pass yards, 4,500 rush yards, and 201 career touchdowns.
Wow.
That's one kid. By the way, Whippets, arguably the best name for a team. I love the name Whippets. I grew up next to a Whippet named Pharaoh, which is the fastest living animal I've ever seen. A Whippet's kind of like a greyhound. Mark, your thoughts on Braden DeVito? The question was he get Mr. Football? Kind of a small school, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, a coach from actually Michigan called me about him 2 years ago. That's how well he was, in his sophomore year. Like, he was kind of blowing up then. And there was, will he be a receiver? Will he be a defensive back? Will he keep growing? Those numbers are off the charts. That 13,000 yards passing is unbelievable. And I'm going to digress here. This is something for the historians, and I'm going to do my best for my memory to get this story right. So if I'm wrong, don't crucify me, because I know once you put it on a podcast, people think it's the Bible. The Mock brothers, the quarterbacks that played at Kenton.
Matty Mock?
Matty Mock and his brother Ben Mock. Ben Mock went to Cincinnati. Matty went to Missouri. Okay. And the first one was Ben. He threw for 15,000 yards. Okay. And that was the Ohio record. So that's how close that is to that record. Now, I'm going to give you a little caveat in this to make it interesting. The older brother, Matty, started as a freshman, and I went to a game, and I'm going to tell you what I witnessed. It was versus Wapakoneta, and they were leading 77-10, and they onside kicked, and they started throwing the ball on all 4 downs, and they had their starting quarterback in. So they were running up the score to 83-10 with less than a minute left in the fourth quarter to try to get more stats for the quarterback. They didn't have a running back on their team. It was 5 wide receivers every play. They onside kick every kick of the entire year. Okay. Matty Mock ended up with 19 or 20,000 passing yards in his 4-year career. Okay. So that's the school record. That's the national record. His father was president of the OSHAA at the time, or one of the directors.
And the head coach.
And the head coach. The first order of business he had done at the end of that year was the running clock. Okay. That would prevent anybody from doing the template that he just did. So when I saw 13,000 yards right there in the era of the running clock, okay, that's more like 15 or 18,000 if you put it in the old school days where you could just pound people if your coach chose to do so. So I know that doesn't exactly shed a great light on those records, but I want to compliment DeVito in a long-winded way to say, 13,000 yards passing, young man, you have done something in the running clock era.
Mark, what is the name of the coach of Shelby?
Oh, you had to ask me, didn't you? Oh.
Is his last name DeVito?
No, but there you go.
I get your point. That's the achievement. That's the achievement. You go rank, I'll guarantee you this, and I don't know this, and I'm just talking completely out of my rump here, but go line up all these lip passers who put up all these yards and then match up the last name to the head coach. I'll bet DeVito, doesn't match up. That's an achievement in of itself, that you get someone besides your dad to trust you to gerrymander everything to your advantage. Because listen, it worked for the Mocks. I think they only played like 14 years of college football too. So
yeah, there's some of that going on now. There's some numbers out there that when I see it, and like you said, you see who the dad is, and you see the scores. I tell you what, I've watched some of these running clock games. It's really hard to score a couple times when that clock gets going. I mean, it's running while you're setting up the kickoff, kicking the extra point, running on and off the field. I mean, those games are literally over in 24 minutes in the second half, 2 12-minute clocks that just burn through. And a lot of times coaches do put up the white flag and put the backup JV guys in. Risking injury like that is also something you do when you go for a record like that. And I'll add to that story. The Mocks ended up in the state championship game, Matty's senior year, against Creston Norway. I believe there was about 2 minutes or a minute left in the game, and they went down and scored the game-winning touchdown. And it looked like they were going to walk off the field. State champions, leading passers in the history of time. Doesn't Norwayne return the kickoff for a touchdown to win the game? It was – I don't know if that's karma.
I was going to say, some people would call that football karma.
The football gods were like, I don't know if we can give you every one of the Triple Crown victories there, but that's certainly a story that I do remember. And that let's put this back on DeVito and some of these other kids. The numbers, getting the 13,000 yards passing, and then the rushing yards. That the Mocks didn't have the rushing yards like DeVito. I mean, you throw that in there, and it's a shame. This Mr. Football thing. There's 700 high schools. There's 700 quarterbacks. There are so many people vying for this and so many different levels of football. Like when Ponatoski did it at Moeller, you were assured week in and week out that kid was playing top competition and seeing,
Right.
And so when you win it from that, position, you're like, wow, that's tough stuff. Sometimes at the lower levels, you get discounted. And I don't mean, to do that to a kid, but, the Division 7 level, Division 6 level aren't Moeller football or Division 1 football.
There's a reason that all the record holders for 3-point shots made come from small towns with dad coaches, because trust me on this, that kid's getting his shots up. But you can look at the top 20. Not everybody who finished top 20 of 3-pointers made in the history of Ohio had their dad as coach. All right. Another recruiting question. Any players from Middletown at Ohio State caliber to look at for next year? Their defense seems legit. They are playing Wayne, I believe, in the state semis. Is that accurate? Kind of a Dayton area battle. I cannot remember the name of the defensive end going to Rice from Middletown. All I know is great family, very cool dad, because they were in the same AAU program as one of my sons. Middletown, they've had a little resurgence here. I wasn't sure Middletown could ever get it back.
They're playing St. Xavier. They played
My
last
fault.
week.
Who does Wayne play?
They're out, I think. Let me make sure.
No.
Old Tangi, Sunbury. Yeah, I don't see them in the.
Oh, Wayne lost?
Yeah.
Okay. So you got what? St. X.
You have Middletown versus St. X.
Right.
You have Lakewood versus Olentangy Orange.
Okay, that's
and then
right.
in Division 2, you have Walsh versus Cincinnati Anderson. Cincinnati Anderson versus Big Walnut, and Walsh versus Avon.
That's my fault.
Yeah, that's
Middletown
okay.
beat Wayne.
Yeah, it gets confusing this time of year.
Question: any players from Middletown that you think are Ohio State caliber? If you would know by now, I don't think so currently.
Jaden Davis is the guy.
Yeah.
When we talked about him, and there's a couple others that we're going to be talking about more as we kind of break down their film. Some of the seniors on the team were kind of committed other places, but they may have blown up a little bit senior year. But Middletown, I saw them play versus Lakota West, and Lakota West got them pretty good. And I did not get the impression that night that they would be this far along. So hats off to them for putting a little run in here.
Usually means good coaching. So what's the thing about Chip Kelly being available for the postseason? Did he get fired? He did. Chip Kelly was the highest paid assistant, I believe, in all of football. He was like the $6 million man. He didn't even have to finish the race. So that is what you call a bionic contract that keeps on giving. And good Lord.
Ohio State coordinator curse.
Go ahead, Garrett.
Ohio State coordinator curse from last year, I guess. Man.
Yeah.
Don't know if I would have saw that coming if you asked me a few months ago that both the coordinators that coached Ohio State's national championship would find themselves in dire straits a year from now. But
especially when that was touted as the reason Ohio State wasn't going to repeat by many people, was that, the coaching staff upheaval or not. Another sign of good coaching, by the way, from the head coach. Choosing your assistant coach is very, very difficult, very, very important. When Urban was first hired here originally, I had a guy tell me he'll win the national championship, and when he has to replace those guys, things are going to get scary. I can't tell you who that was because it would give away, but this person knew, and they were right. All right.
Can Chip Kelly be like a consultant the rest of the year for us?
We talked about that.
Hold on. Here's the caveat. A lot of times when you get fired, to get your salary, it's contingent on you not taking another NFL job. Like you can't go take that $6 million he got and say, I'm going to go coach against you the rest of the year. Or you kind of and that's why, like James Franklin had that buyout, but he says, heck with the buyout. I want to keep coaching. Where some guys are more than content to take their $50 million and sit out 5 years and resume their career once the buyout's over. So coming down to college, could he walk into the office and say, okay, I'm just going to consult every now. I'm going to give you 3 or 4 plays a week in the run game that, you may want to sprinkle in or add in, or, we did this last year, but here's, something. No.
No, Ashton Genty averages like 1 yard a carry this year. I'm sorry, I can't.
The Raiders' offensive line, in all fairness,
oh my God,
Chip Kelly fired. Chip may not translate to the NFL, but I don't care who was calling plays behind that offensive line. In fact, watching Chip throw all the bubbles the past couple of weeks, I'm a fantasy nerd. I'm watching that stuff to see he did more smoke and mirrors to actually get them a little bit. But the game where I think they only had 6 rushes, that was like, yeah, that's the end of your days in the NFL. You don't do that in the NFL.
But yes, to answer your question, he could theoretically if he wanted to be a consultant for a month. But you have to ask whether he wants to do that. Like you said, maybe he wants to just go sit on a beach for a month and not think about football until then. And you also have to think, would Brian Hartline be okay with that now that he's an offensive coordinator? Would he want another voice in that room? Who knows? I mean, anything you would say on that subject would be speculation, but you'd have to get all parties' approval on that. And it's also, different running back rooms. So who knows if Chip would want those same run designs to run for Bo Jackson and Isaiah West and CJ Donaldson and all those guys compared to Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. But anyway, to bring this all full circle, if they wanted him, yeah, theoretically, he could be a consultant for a month. Sure, why not?
I love the comments. Please stay away. Don't come back. But I mean, last year at this time, we were singing this guy's praises. Like he was
the Matt Patricia what happened. He was amazing
last year. Yeah, you can't. Yeah. And to say that I don't even want him in the room like Joe Philbin, how he was kind of helping us out, the Miami Dolphins head coach. He was like a silent guy. You never heard a word or a peep or a media thing. And I'm sure behind the scenes he had some thoughts that were positive. But yeah, I get it. The room is established. You don't want to break the mojo. That could be the reason alone. But that the comments are funny about Chip. What have you done for me lately?
I will say that game plan in that Oregon Rose Bowl game was chef's kiss. That from Chip Kelly. That was a clinic.
Look, Chip Kelly is a mercurial, polarizing individual.
He is.
You could make an argument that his best fit ever, and I say fit because you got to go to work every day and work with people, was at Ohio State. And that's because his disciple was the head coach. So this is not him going back to help would be closer to, and please don't drive off the road, would be closer to like Jim Harbaugh going to help John Harbaugh, like on the sideline, you know what I mean? And offer up his 2 cents. That said,
and you know what, I get the question I get the most this year with the Buckeye and the Skies has been about the offensive line and the run game. And, is there whatever, some more potency we can get out of it? And people have asked like, oh, Chip Kelly had some things last year, some little wrinkles that helped that out. And, I don't know if it was exactly Chip or who you can give credit to, but it's definitely an interesting topic. I'm enjoying the comments both ways because I thought, like Dan said, those guys are best friends. Even if like he would just came to Columbus and kind of stood around at practice for a week and wasn't at the games, he may have thoughts or something to pass along. Just the more heads in the room, sometimes the better. But I understand we're on a heater and there's some mojo to it. And yeah, don't mess with what's going on in there.
Keep in mind also that Michigan's defensive coordinator has an NFL background too, so they may know each other a little bit. That might be a reason to bring him in if he has like specific knowledge of Wink Martindale that's better than other people on the staff. That said, Matt Patricia, he's done okay in the NFL as a defensive coordinator.
It's as simple as like Dan, just like you said, hey, remember, Chip down around the goal line, he likes to do this, or Wink down around on 3rd and 1 here, he's 100% this. Oh, that's right. I forgot he always comes off the weak side on that thing or whatever. There's just stuff like that guys pass along that, there's so much football that goes through their brain. It almost overwrites football, so it's like bringing in a fresh perspective. Like, hey, that part of my brain hasn't been overwritten yet. Remember this about Michigan. And I was at St. Henry this week for the Marion local upset. So talk about having a good week to see that win a 74-game winning streak come to an end.
I don't think that was unpredictable though. Marion local got away with one this year earlier in the season.
Yes.
And they weren't quite as dominant.
Yep.
I think the St. Henry people are pretty confident.
I called my son in the first half and said, I smell an upset.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel right tonight. Like because they were 4 out a couple times. They were trying. Marion local was trying so hard to make a play in the first half and just could not do it. Where every time I've watched them before, it just came so easy.
I know you guys like digressions. Bobby Hoying's family lives in my town, and his nephew is going to be a freshman is going to be the best basketball player ever to attend Oakwood High School. And if I say that out loud, I mean it. Just get ready. You're going to hear some digressions up here from me that are going to, you're going to want to get cable. All right, let's ask some more questions here. Questions.
While you're looking for it, before we got into a Chip Kelly tangent, I know someone had a question about CJ Brona, so I can just answer
I was about to say, Garrick, as CJ Brona's PR representative for the site, you are legally obligated to comment on the kind of small school Florida commit defensive back state champion in the 100 who visited. And we were in that kind of, I think, after a guy visits, there's like a honeymoon phase of 2 days. And then it kind of went away. And now people are worried. Your thoughts on the potential for flipping CJ Brona?
All right, sure. I'll talk a little bit while you look for the next question to put on there. But there's not a whole lot new with CJ Brona. I will say that last week he said that he expected to make a decision by the end of the week. Clearly, a decision has not been made. I will say that source came more from someone that was close to the Brona family than it did from Ohio State. So that was not a directive from Ohio State per se to make your mind up in a week. The family's gone pretty radio silent as they head into decision mode. Now, the good news with that is that we're going to know in a week from tomorrow, right? Whether he ends up going to Ohio State or ultimately sticking with Florida, because signing day is a week from tomorrow. But I would say the longer this goes on, probably the more worrisome it is for Ohio State. Certainly, I felt really good about CJ coming out of that visit. All the talks were positive. I don't think there's been anything to make me say that Ohio State doesn't have a chance or doesn't feel good anymore about it. But the longer it goes on, the more you think, well, what are you waiting for, right? Now, this is just me completely off the dome speculating, just my 2 cents. I'm very interested to see if this weekend has an effect, not just Ohio State, but everybody, because we know for sure Lane Kiffin is finally going to make a decision on where he's going to be coaching next season, whether it's at Ole Miss, at LSU, or at Florida, which is why I bring him up. If Lane Kiffin goes to Florida, perhaps that's more incentive for CJ Brona to stick with the Gators now that he knows that Florida's going to be stable. Again, I don't think Lane Kiffin's going to Florida, but perhaps that family may be getting told by Florida boosters, hey, we think we're getting Lane Kiffin. Don't flip your commitment yet. Please don't do it. If you ask me to guess right now, I would say that Lane Kiffin's probably headed to LSU at this point. That just seems to be the tea leaves. I don't know that for sure. I'm not an insider in that effect, but yeah, I mean, while we're on the subject of Lane Kiffin, that also would probably be pretty telling for Darius McKinley's recruitment, right? We talked about him. He also took an official visit for the UCLA game. I think if LSU gets Lane Kiffin, they might be able to hold off LSU. I know that the McKinley family has always loved staying in Louisiana, and if you give them a reason to stay in Louisiana, that might ultimately end up being what happens. So I know Dan loves the old 2-for-1, but maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. Not saying it can't happen. They will certainly still keep trying, but I think Lane Kiffin's decision this weekend could have some domino effects, perhaps on Ohio State, but most certainly on the rest of the recruiting sphere in the 2026 class as we head into signing day on Wednesday.
Garrick, I'm going to ask you the question that I know I haven't hit refresh here, but I think is on there. What do you think if Lane took the LSU job? How do you think that would affect Blaine Bradford's commitment to Ohio State?
Oh, God. I didn't even think about that. Thanks, Dan.
I know what the Nutters want to know. And
yeah.
A Baton Rouge safety committed to Ohio State with a new coach. My guess is one of the first.
I would certainly guess they'd make a last Hail Mary ditch effort for him. I mean, schools across the country are making last ditch Hail Mary efforts. The Bradford family's doing the right things. They're saying the right things. They haven't given LSU the time of day up until this point. But yeah, ultimately, would that end up mattering? I would say right now, probably not, but I may be very wrong in a couple days if Kiffin gets going there. The one thing I would say in that effect that maybe OSU has going for it is that, and maybe this can be what we close on, and the master of digressions, right, is that if Lane leaves, he's bailing on a college football playoff team. and that there is going to be a very negative public relations spin across the country. And I don't know. I mean, Jimmy Sexton is a masterclass of handling PR and spinning it back in his client's favor, right? But this isn't a coach that's leaving the Music City Bowl to go take a better job. This isn't a coach that's, as much as I love this bowl with all my heart, leaving the Pop-Tarts Bowl to go. This is a guy that has a chance to win the national championship and is bailing on his team to go coach another team in the same conference. And listen, is LSU a better job than Ole Miss? Unquestionably. But at the same time, Lane Kiffin has Ole Miss at 10-1 and 11-1 because they're certainly a better team than Mississippi State if that game's played on paper. You've proven that you can do it there, and Ole Miss is willing to be competitive financially, so it's not a matter of money. So that's all a long-winded way to say maybe the PR spin really resonates with some recruits and maybe it doesn't with others, because there's going to be a lot of backlash to, okay, you really want to go play for a guy that the biggest game in your school's history, he's leaving you and he promised he would be there for you to get you to those heights, and now he's leaving? Something to think about.
Definitely. The issue is they can say that and then hand you a check for X amount of dollars, and you're like,
That
you know
helps.
what? I think Lane's
Garrick,
Lane feels more honest to me right now. I don't know. I feel he feels more worthy.
Garrick, if the Michigan podcast offered you triple what they're paying you at this podcast, you'd leave in the middle of the podcast and walk out that white door behind you, and you wouldn't even look back.
Well, sure, but if it was a matter of money, like that was my whole point. Like, I don't think this is a matter of money.
We've become so cynical here, and I jokingly do that, but right. With where we came from a couple of years ago with money's not going to really affect this, to it's all about the money. I think there's that type of like resignation with stuff like that. You know, like the NFL, we have to learn from the NFL, because you're going to ruin the brand of college football if college coaches say, yeah, my playoff team's not good enough to hang around. Can you imagine an NFL coach bailing the first week of the playoffs and being like, yeah, I'm going to go coach somewhere else? You got to put in a rule where this stuff can't happen till the end of the year, or something where there's a gentleman's agreement, because you're right. Money is going to corrupt this game, and there's going to be fans that it just turns off, you know, and not just at that school, but the brand of college football. We want to see 12 teams in there at peak strength with their coaches raring to go, not lame duck teams that just get sent in there and their coaches bail on them. That wasn't the idea of bringing 12 teams into the playoffs. I mean, is it so bad to be the 12th ranked team in the playoffs? Jeez, oh man.
No, but I think the way Lane is looking at it, and I hate to bring this back up, he won't be the 12th highest paid coach in the playoff, and that's just how it works. I think there's just also a belief, like Garrick was saying, that LSU is just, for example, or Florida is a better job than Ole Miss. The question is that still true? I think it probably is, but it's not definitely. Like, if this was let's say this was just a decade ago off the top, no one would stay at Ole Miss instead of going to LSU or Florida. That'd be done by now. The only reason it's even possibly reason to stay is because of the NIL and stuff like that. So it depends which way you look at it. Here's how I look at it. Good to be king. We'll be back on Thursday. No, we will not be back on Thursday. I apologize. I got to give these guys a day off, believe it or not. Holiday.
I was like, damn, you want me to just eat a drumstick of turkey while I'm doing the pod on Thursday?
I want to live stream the Turkey Bowl I'll be playing in. I think I want to break it down after and do some X's and O's on the best plays of the Porter Turkey Bowl.
You know what? Why don't you
break it down being key?
I will break down the Porter Bowl. I'll be like, Mark really doesn't get low here. It says low man wins. He just really doesn't want it here. Look at DJ just leapfrogging him and just making him look silly. I would love
the trash talk in our house right now is at an all-time high. They're finally at an age where they think they're going to take the old man down.
They're not. There's something called let them start paying taxes. That's that old man strength. That's how you sit down and take on a block there.
You have to lay down the law around here.
All right, guys. Buck Rational, go solo and tell us this one time at boarding school stories. No way. And let me tell you the best thing about boarding school in the 80s. No cameras. All right. Have a good one. Nutters of Buck.